All right. What's up, everyone? We are back with the Fresh One podcast, a BD Outdoors podcast. I'm here with my friend and colleague, Ricky Fischel. We have Ira behind the scenes today, and we have an amazing guest. We are super stoked to talk about some really cool stuff you probably won't ever get the chance to hear about anywhere else. So we're here with Owyn Snodgrass from NOAA. Go ahead and tell everyone who you are, what you do, and why you're here today.
Yeah, thanks, Cameron. My name is Owyn Snodgrass. I'm a fisheries research biologist with NOAA Fisheries. I work on a lot of different fisheries that are important to recreational and commercial people. Primarily, a lot of my work over the past 10 or 15 years has been on bluefin tuna and albacore tuna research, but I've been working on all kinds of different species ranging from swordfish, yellowtail, different species of sharks, and I'm now starting to work a lot more on like coastal pelagic species, which are your mackerels, your anchovy, and your sardines. So
Wow.
been around La Jolla, born and raised here, and found my way into this industry, and I'm passionate about fishing, so it's been amazing to just be able to do research and learn more about a lot of these fish that we have off SoCal.
Yeah, that's pretty. That's pretty cool. You were telling me, didn't you just get off of a pretty long trip where you were following bait around what, like Northern California or Central California?
Yeah. So we do a coastal pelagic survey every year, which starts actually in Southern California, right off San Diego, and then we go all the way from San Diego up to the Canadian border, where we're looking. Basically, we're driving around during the day with acoustics, trying to mark different schools of mackerel or anchovy or sardines. Then we come back through them and we do trawls at night, and then we collect those fish and we quantify them, like measure them, weigh them, and then take biological samples like otoliths and gonads, and we take that back to the lab so we can age the fish, look at when they're reproducing and where they're reproducing, and we put it all together for an annual report essentially, and that gets fed into like stock assessments, which dictates management of the species, like commercial fishing for sardines or something like that. Yeah. So I was just out there. It's a 3-month long survey usually. I was only out there for a month.
Oh, okay, I was gonna say 3 months. That's quite a while.
And you can actually age a bait fish.
Yeah.
Okay.
You take I don't know if you guys know what otoliths are.
Yeah.
It's basically every fish has otoliths. They're in the bone. Like a lot of people know, like sea bass stones essentially. Like you catch a white sea bass, and like the trophy that you keep is the stones out of the head. And those are two bones located in the brain essentially, and those are otoliths. And you can take those just like aging a tree. You look at the rings essentially over time. You can do the same thing with otoliths out of the fish, like a bait fish, any fish essentially. So
What is the average lifespan of like a sardine or a mackerel?
Sardines, they get up to like 7 to 9 years old.
Really?
Actually, yeah.
Wow.
Mackerel, I think some of the species, depending if it's jack mackerel or Pacific mackerel, jack mackerel live pretty long time, like over 12 years. Same with Pacific mackerel. But the majority of them are like 0, 1, or 2 year olds essentially. So if you were to go age like your typical sardine out of your bait tank, it's probably less than a year old. Like about that big or something like that. That's like a 0-year-old. And they grow pretty fast when they're small, but then they start to slow down. Like all fish, when they're larvae, they grow real fast, and then as they start to get older and become mature and start doing their thing reproducing, they put all their energy into eggs and sperm, essentially.
Speaking of bluefin, I'm sorry to make you talk about it, but that's really, what everyone in Southern California is so curious about. Just talking about the migration patterns, what we've seen over the past, 10 plus years. And this year especially, it seems like the past 2 or 3 years, we're really seeing a lot more fish up in NorCal. Yeah. I don't know if that's just because more people are fishing for it or what's going on, but I know, their big fish fishing up in San Francisco is quite honestly like a little bit better than ours is right now.
Yeah, no, it's crazy.
It's kind of interesting to see.
Yep, I have a buddy that fishes off like a 17-foot radin up there, and he's been just sending me pictures of like, he goes out 6 miles off the beach and he's catching 200-300 pounders. Like, I guess there was a 212 pounder caught up there last week, and where he was fishing, I'm like, super close too. I'm like, what? I don't know, I missed that. Like,
and we're down here going 90 miles offshore to the Outer Banks to find that stuff. And I mean, luckily, those guys get 5 days out of the entire month that are good enough weather to fish.
It's true.
So we have it a little bit better down here as far as weather goes, but it's just really interesting to see, that body of fish we didn't have any lack of bluefin here this year, but it certainly seemed like it was more spread out.
Yeah, for
and
sure.
I don't know if you can speak to this at all, but it seems like early season, we have good bluefin fishing, and that big fish will kind of follow the schooly stuff up here, and we'll have good fishing on the big stuff down by the tuna pens. And then for whatever reason this year and last year, it kind of seemed like they popped up out of nowhere up by the Channel Islands and kind of bypassed. We didn't really see them on our local banks this year as well as we had in the past. And everyone's guessing like, oh, maybe it is swimming through at 600 feet. How could we miss it? We have the whole fleet out there. But
yeah, no, that's interesting. This year is definitely a little different. They've been following a very similar migration pattern, like from the banks down off south and then into the Bight, essentially, then like out to the Tanner or the Cortez and stuff like that, or the backside of San Clemente for a while now. And the fleet is definitely on them all the time. So some of these fish might have been further offshore and pushed in up there off like the Channel Islands or a little bit further north. And what I was looking into was where the anchovy were, because previous years there was more anchovy in the Bight earlier. Everything this year seemed a little delayed, kind of, and we didn't have that much anchovy really in the Bight tight to the beach until I think it was like maybe the beginning of August or something like that. Yeah. So our survey went through and we didn't really catch that much anchovy in the Bight, and then we started hitting a lot of anchovy further up north. So a lot of this stuff is also related to probably like where the bait is.
100%.
Like with fishing, like you find the bait, find the fish, essentially. So anchovy has been loaded, or was loaded, up north before it was down here. Then the anchovy kind of pushed into the Bight, and that's when we had all these fish off Oceanside, like tight there, like the foamer fishing, like 6-12 miles off the beach in that dirty, like brown water.
Yeah, that was another interesting thing too. We spend so much time looking at chloro charts, and for a while there we were fishing in what looked like mud, right off the beach. And even 2 days ago, Ira and myself were out 7 miles off Encinitas and caught bluefin and red tide.
Yep.
And I think more and more we're learning that yes, chloro and sea surface temperatures are important for finding fish, but wherever their food is probably where they're going to be.
Yeah,
and there was just tonnage of bait.
That's always been something I follow. Like strictly, if there's no bait there, you're not going to find actively feeding fish. There still might be fish coming through the area, and you might be able to offer them a nice mackerel or sardine or something like that and get a bite. But so that's, I don't know, that dirty water is where a lot of the nutrients are.
Yeah.
Like when it's dirty like that, it's because there's a lot of chlorophyll and there's a lot of other things that feed on it. Like anchovies are filter feeders, essentially. They swim through the water and they basically have their mouths open and they're eating all that stuff. So the anchovy biomass is oftentimes right on that edge or in the dirty water. I mean, I've had some of my best fishing like in super dirty water where you don't even see the fish. Like my biggest yellowtail was in like, I don't think I saw it until I was 3 feet out of the boat. I thought it was a shark the whole time. And then it came up and I was just like, oh my God, like 46-pound yellowtail gaffed it. And I was just like, that was not what I was expecting. And that's what I was targeting. But yeah, same with like bluefin, like a little bit further offshore, that dirty water, like that's where a lot of the prey is. I mean, the prey kind of like anchovies and sardines, so they follow that biomass essentially of small chlorophyll and plankton and all that stuff. So
that fish, that predatory fish, has no issue finding bait, because sometimes for a good chunk of the season here on the Outer Banks, the water was pretty green, and we're flying the kite, and these fish are, sitting at 100, 150 feet, and we go, can they even see this bait? Like, what are we doing here? And they do. Just, I don't know how, but
I don't know about that either. That's a crazy question. I don't know if they hear it or they sense it or whatnot, if they can see it. I mean, they do have really good vision. They're obviously active, like visual predators essentially. But yeah,
I know before we started rolling here, Cam was talking to you about this 100-year cycle thing that we're seeing with our bluefin, and we have a diagram here that we'll pull up on the screen. But a lot of people are curious if this fish is reaching sexual maturity here. Are they breeding in the Bight? Yep. Or what's going on here. So I don't know if you want to reference this diagram at all and Put it in layman's terms for us.
This is a pretty old figure from Bailiff et al., which basically documents the spawning grounds and then some of the migratory paths of Pacific bluefin tuna. So the spawning grounds are all right around Japan and into the seas over there by China and Taiwan. And then a good portion of them actually migrates as 1 to 3 year olds over to the Southern California Bight. Spends a certain amount of time here. Lots of factors can come into play in terms of how much time they spend here, food availability, water conditions, stuff like that. But they get to a certain size and they go back to Japan and they spawn over there essentially. In terms of the 100-year cycle, it's a good question. I don't know if it's necessarily a 100-year cycle. A lot of the guys say that, because we haven't seen these bluefin this size and this many since the early 1900s when Zane Grey was fishing and stuff like that.
They say 1920, right? It went from 1908 to 1920 and then they completely disappeared.
Yeah, no, I was looking through some of the old Avalon Tuna Club records, and you can see there were some big fish caught in 1898. I think there was around a 200-pound fish. The records don't designate if it's bluefin or yellowfin, but I'm pretty sure it was bluefin. You don't have that many yellowfin that large around here ever. So. Yeah. But it went up to 1922 and 23 or something like that in the records. But if you look at the records, there are some big fish scattered throughout, And I remember when I first started this job, we were catching the occasional 174-pound bluefin or something like that. So there were big fish still being caught, but not a lot of them. Mm-hmm. So we're seeing a lot of big bluefin since 2012, and it's pretty interesting to think about in terms of maybe is it a 100-year cycle? All of a sudden there's just this happens every 100 years. I don't necessarily buy into that. You can look at all kinds of other stuff. 2012 was also when fisheries management efforts really dramatically increased on bluefin because their population was the stock assessment showed that they were down to 3.2% of their historical population size. So they put in some dramatic measures to reduce quotas around the Pacific. All of the countries came together. This is an internationally managed species. And right then, the commercial quotas were dramatically dropped, essentially. And we slowly started seeing more and more bluefin. So, in my opinion, it's potentially more management implications mm-hmm. that are actually showing and helping the population rebound. So the population's rebounding faster than predicted, actually. They put these things in place with a goal to increase the population size a certain percentage every year, and then they have an end date where they want it to be rebuilt to this amount, and it's actually coming back faster than they wanted. So I don't know if these things keep working. It might be a.
How are they? How are you guys measuring that?
I was gonna say, how do you go about quantifying the bluefin stock? The ocean's so big,
Yeah, no, that's a good question. It's really based off fisheries data. So they all the fisheries in the world, purse seine, longline, all that stuff.
That's the
around
data.
The Pacific. Okay. They all provide data essentially, and they provide effort. So how much are these guys fishing, and how fast are they catching these fish? How big are the fish, essentially? And then it's a pretty complicated model. They incorporate stuff they normally mature around this size, so this is the spawning stock, and it's based on the size of the spawning stock, essentially, on the spawning grounds. So how many big fish are there, and how many are being caught?
Okay.
So it's basically fisheries-related data.
Okay. Well, speaking of spawning, we do have these questions of if these fish are, reaching sexual maturity in the bite. What is the age and size of, generally speaking, ballpark of a sexually mature bluefin?
Yeah, so that's pretty well documented. I did a lot of collections of very large female bluefin tuna gonads, or ovaries, essentially, where you would expect to see eggs if they were mature. And everyone I collected there was no sign of an actual eggs. They were, it's decent sized fish and decent sized ovaries, but I never saw an actual egg, or oocyte is what they call it. And there's pretty strict identification, basically characteristics, where you can look at an egg and see what stage it is, and if it might be spawning, might have spawned, or is going to spawn in the future. And I never found anything in my collections here off the Southern California Bight that showed any evidence of spawning. But the age that a lot of these fish get to, and you can consider them reproductively mature is like 5 to 7 years essentially. So that's like a 150-pound fish.
Oh, really?
So a lot of these fish out here are at the size where if they were at the spawning grounds and the conditions were right, they might actually be spawning. So for a fish to spawn, it needs very specific conditions. Sea surface temperature comes into that, and a lot of other factors essentially. So we don't have like necessarily water where bluefin prefer to spawn in off the Southern California Bight very often. And even if they did spawn, their eggs and larvae probably wouldn't be viable because they get infected in the current, and they'll probably go into colder water, and the eggs and larvae would die essentially. So the spawning grounds, like in the Sea of Japan, it's like a very tight little warm body of water, and when they spawn, the timing of that is perfect for eggs and larvae to develop. But yeah, no, we do have fish of reproductively potentially mature size here, but we haven't seen any evidence of actual active spawning. And there's also a database, the Cal Coffee database, which does crazy surveys every year going back since like 1950 or so, and they do egg and larvae basically assessment of what they see in Southern California. They've never picked up a bluefin tuna larvae.
Interesting.
Yeah, but so we don't have any evidence of actual spawning here. The fish are large enough to be considered of the age where they could, in theory, functionally spawn. Yeah.
You think having them, if we did find out that they were spawning here, that it would change the fishery? Like there would be more of them?
I don't know if that would necessarily mean anything in terms of like the number of bluefin that we see off our coasts and stuff like that, but it would definitely, I mean, management would be potentially augmented. I don't know if it'd be favorable or less favorable for our fishing opportunities that we have here. So it would definitely complicate the situation in terms of management. Let's put it that way. So I don't know if you necessarily want to prove that. Like in the Atlantic, there's two known spawning grounds. One is in the Mediterranean Sea, and then one in the Gulf of Mexico, essentially. So in those, the Atlantic bluefin are kind of managed separately, but there is known migrations back and forth where a fish from the Gulf of Mexico will go into the Med, or the Mediterranean fish will come down here. And those have been known spawning grounds for a long time, and they're managed based on that. Mm-hmm. But recently, up north off the East Coast, there were some researchers which found what they consider like recently spawned eggs and larvae. So they were like theorizing that there's another spawning stock in that area, and they never actually found a reproductively mature female with obvious gonads that were showing eggs that were about to be spawned or developed to the point where they were like ready to go. But if they had, that would change everything. So
management and regulations wise,
management would be very different.
Well, I know we get so excited when someone catches, like a 7-pound bluefin here. Oh, it's a baby, it must have been born here.
Yeah.
You think about something like that swimming across the entire Pacific Ocean. It's not a small feat.
No, it's crazy.
I meant to ask when we pulled that up, looking at that diagram again, I'm sitting here staring at it. How long would it take them to cross the Pacific Ocean?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. We did a lot of work on trying to establish a timeline or whatever for the fish that recently arrived here. So really quickly, one of the smallest fish I did sample was a 6.5 pounder this year, and that was on the certified scale off the NOAA. Yeah, wow. 6.5. That's the smallest one in my database, and I've been collecting these since 2008. So it was pretty cool. Oh, I got it off a fisherman. I work with the guys in the NOAA and 5-star and all that stuff, so I get all my biological samples through rec fishermen essentially. But yeah, so we the otoliths, again, going back to otoliths, that's how you age a fish, right? But you can also use them with these cool techniques like to look at the microchemistry. So I mean, it's all kind of like you are what you eat, or the water chemistry gets incorporated into your body, not what you're eating also, but the chemistry of the water. So basically, you can take the otolith out of the fish, and it's like a hard record. We could pull up an image of an otolith, and I can show you where we take the otolith and you section it down, and you drill out each section. So when the otolith is really small, it starts incorporating the chemistry from the seawater essentially. So the seawater off Japan is much different than the seawater off Southern California, right? Little micronutrients and stuff like that. I'll have to link one of the papers that I am an author on. But essentially, the inside of that otolith is where it was born. So if you were to drill out that section and look at the basically like the carbon, nitrogen, oxygen levels, you could link that to the seawater where it came from. So you could then follow it over time, and when it enters the California current, that signature is going to change pretty dramatically because the California current is nutrient rich, upwelling, all kinds of stuff occurring here. So what we did is we took these small bluefin tuna, which pretty much they either might have been spawned here or they came from Japan, and we drilled back in time on the otoliths, and you can see where it matches up to the Sea of Japan, and then all of a sudden there's a dramatic shift, and you can time it to basically them arriving in the California current. And it varied over time. Not every fish made that journey in the same amount of time. I think it was like 33 days was
Wow.
Really?
the fastest, 33 to 60 days essentially. And these are like 14-pound fish or something like that. So they travel all the way from Japan in a month to 3 months, something like that.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
That's insane. Do you think are they feeding as they move over?
Well,
are
they
they
gotta
just
eat.
Yeah.
Of course they gotta eat, but like, that's like, I feel like they're just hauling ass the whole time. Like, are they?
Yeah, I think we don't really know because nobody catches them along that route essentially. We don't know if they're down deep during then, or we have an idea of the route that they take essentially. Based on that figure we showed earlier, you can kind of theorize that this is where they're going. But they probably take the fastest, shortest route, and they're probably not feeding all that much. If they encounter bait or something like that, sure, I bet they're gonna, eat what they're seeing along the way. But one of the reasons why they migrate here is to get all fat and happy and then big enough to then go back and spawn. So California current is super productive, right? That's why we have all this anchovy. It's actually known as there's 5 different areas around the globe that are called eastern boundary currents. And California coast is one of them. It's basically an area where there's tons of upwelling, and all of a sudden, like, that brings all the nutrients from the bottom, and then you have the chlorophyll blooms, like red tide, stuff like that, and then that feeds like everything up the food chain. So it's just an extremely productive current that we have here off California. So all these bluefin, they're moving over here basically to forage, and they move real quickly. They're small, they want food, they want to grow fast, and it's just,
But they don't want to eat my sardines.
yeah.
While we're speaking to these guys foraging, before we hopped on your top, saying you've done a ton of or you had a ton of experience working with stomach content, and I kind of wanted to talk about, well, first off, to just figure out the weirdest thing you've ever seen inside of a bluefin's belly, aside from your typical squid, sardine, anchovy, mackerel, red crab type.
No, I've seen bluefin is kind of generally pretty boring. I've done a lot of different stomach content. I've done Opah stomach content, which is very cool.
Let's talk about
they
it.
eat everything. But in terms of the weirdest thing I've seen in bluefin, which kind of shocked me, was I'd opened up like a handful of stomachs one year, and there was little pieces of tar in their stomachs. Like, I was like, what is that? Like, it's black, it's hard, and I smelled it, and it was like, that's tar. And I don't know where it could have been, like, naturally occurring, because there are like oil seeps and there's tar that naturally occurs. It could have been from a tanker ship, something like that. But generally speaking, the bluefin tuna stomachs are either empty or they've got chum sardines in them, because I'm getting my samples from the recreational fishery.
Yeah.
Or they'll have a lot of digested parts like vertebra, otoliths. So when a tuna eats an anchovy, eventually it digests it down. And if you open a stomach and it had been eating anchovy the day before, you're going to have a bunch of anchovy otoliths. And then you can be like, oh yeah, you can count them all, and you can be like, oh, there's 150 otoliths in here. It ate 75 anchovy, because every fish has 2 otoliths. But I'll find squid beaks and all kinds of stuff. But not too much weird stuff in bluefin stomachs.
No, like baby shoes or anything like that.
No. For Opah, the one weird thing that I did find was I had a volunteer working for me, and she was processing through Opah stomachs that we get, and she was like, hey, get over here, Owen, get over here, check this out, what do you think this is? I'm like, I don't know what that is. Like, she's like, it's a wedge of lime. I'm like, no
way.
Whoa.
And I looked at it and I was like, I think you're right. She's like, smell it. And I picked it up and smelled it. I'm like, sure enough, it was like full citrus, like wedge of lime. Like,
Wow.
Came out of someone's beer.
blew me away. But Opah are like, they're kind of like, they eat whatever they see in the water column. I did find a lot of plastics in Opah. I haven't seen any plastics in bluefin. Everyone always asks me that question, like, do you see plastics in the bluefin tuna stomachs? I'm like, I've never seen it, but Opah basically walk or swim through the water column and eat whatever they see whenever they see it. So I did find a lot of weird stuff in Opah. The lime, lots of plastics, just weird stuff in stomachs. Like, so my theory with the Wedge of Lime was someone was fishing, having a Corona, and a piece of lime fell off the boat and the Opah ate it. Similar to like a cruise ship maybe dumped over their trash or something like that. So we have a person in our lab that did shark stomach contents for years, and she opened up a couple of shark stomachs and she found like old pork chops and stuff like that.
Really?
Yeah, it was
Whatever's available.
Yeah. So they're probably following a cruise ship, eating trash that falls off the cruise ship. But yeah, no. And what I find interesting though about the bluefin diets that I've been looking at over time is not necessarily what's in each individual stomach, but the trends year to year, essentially. So one year, what are they eating? The next year, the next year, the next year. And there's been some pretty dramatic shifts in what I've found, which I think is cool, because you can then link it to environmental conditions, or was this an El Nino? Was this a La Nina? What were the fish doing when they were caught? Were they up top foaming? Were they down deep? Stuff like that. Was it nighttime? Was it daytime? And there's a publication which you guys could link to it or something like that later. It's basically, it shows the results from all the stomachs that I opened from 2008 to 2016. We're currently working to increase that, basically the time series, so we'll have data up till 2023 in the near future. But in 2008, all the fish I was collecting were on the 60-mile bank essentially, and they were all full of deep scattering layer stuff. We talked about that earlier in terms of related to swordfish, but it was all, they were feeding down deep. You never saw a surface boil, and it was all just like dropping down like sinker rigs essentially on the 60-mile bank. So the fish were really associated tight to the bank, and they were eating small squid, small myctophids, and basically nothing else for like a month straight. And then you fast forward to like, that kind of continued for a couple of years. I got samples from more different areas and stuff like that, but it was all kind of deep scattering layer, deep stuff. I started finding a lot of crustaceans, small squid, small rockfish, like all little stuff essentially. So everything they were eating was like what we call young of the year essentially. It's just like it was recently spawned and just gotten big enough that, able to swim on its own, and then it got eaten by tuna. But so that happened, or that continued until about 2014, something like that, and then we started seeing like this warm water in the El Nino, and then all the pelagic red crabs and stuff like that, and the anchovy population started coming back, and then all of a sudden these fish were no longer down deep, and you didn't see them on the sonar. You're seeing them up top foaming on anchovies. So whatever they're eating is basically, you can link it to their behavior and their accessibility to fishermen. If there's a lot of anchovy, they're probably going to be up top foaming. Birds are going to see them. You don't have to rely on your sonar as much, driving around just looking at your screen. So it's pretty cool.
A little more exciting.
Yeah, it's more exciting too. Yeah, linking what they're eating to the way they're behaving, and then how easy they are to catch. That's the end goal, right?
Catch and eat.
Yep.
That red crab though that we got during the El Nino, I don't know if this is true or not. I'm not a scientist, but I've read that it's not actually very nutritious for the fish, because we were catching these fish, and they were just jug. You open the stomachs and it's 5 pounds of red crab.
Yeah.
But I guess it just floats there, so it's easy it's low expenditure of energy to eat.
You pretty much nailed it right there.
Yeah.
I mean, like I talked to a lot of people about this, and I basically was saying the same thing. It's like you're sitting there on the couch eating a bag of popcorn, versus like you're out there trying to capture your prey, like actively like ball up the school of anchovy and stuff like that. When there's just red crab sitting around, you're basically just like popping more popcorn, like, so eventually you get what you need, right? And we did in the paper that I was referencing earlier, that hopefully you guys can show the link or something like that. It's a great read. We explored that. We compared the different years, like the different time periods, to look at the energy or the caloric intake versus like the deep scattering layer year versus the red crab year versus the anchovy years. Basically, when you boil it down, is like they were getting the same amount of nutrients from each different prey type. But because it's a numbers game, it's how easy it is to capture your prey. It's kind of like similar to fishing a squid nest or something like that. Like you get these sea lions. Like there was a couple years where there was a big sea lion mortality event, and everyone was saying, oh, there's because there's no anchovy, there's no anchovy, and there's no anchovy. Like these things aren't getting the oils and the nutrients that they need. But there was tons of squid that year. So like, you travel 300 miles offshore trying to find a school of anchovy, or if you go 2 miles and you're eating off a squid nest, like aren't you getting probably the same amount? I don't know.
Sure.
Like I've had conversations about this for hours with different researchers. Yeah.
So one thing I made it.
Go ahead.
I was just say one thing I made a note of, before you came in here is, I'm a surfer, snowboarder as well, Southern California raised.
Yep.
Everything that I do relies on, is it going to be El Nino or La Nina? And it seems like everyone has their own opinion of what it is, when it's going to happen. And one year you're like, oh, it's for sure La Nina. And then some guy around the corner is like, no, it's definitely El Nino. And like, I don't know. And like, you're sitting right here in front of me. So I'd love for you to explain it at a base level. And then I'd love to hear you elaborate on, 2015, for example, being the craziest El Nino. And then, correct me if I'm wrong, wasn't last year a La Nina with all the snow and everything that we had, all the rain?
I'd also be curious to hear, and
Yeah.
I think our audience would be, about what's happening now. And I know we don't want to guess about what's going to happen, but maybe, think about the potential effects of if we're entering into an El Nino winter, what that means for next year,
Yep.
as far as the fishery goes.
Yeah, so there's a lot to unpack there. It's
Yeah.
pretty.
We're learning.
Southern California too, and I love like El Nino winters, like blacks, or like the best surf I had was, I think it was 2012. Scripps turned into basically like pipe, and it was just like an El Nino winter, like just stand up barrels, like right off the pier there.
Yeah.
I'm excited about this year because it's looking like it's going to go into a decent El Nino. There's a couple different websites we can put the link in there too,
Yeah,
where you
definitely.
can look back at all the El Nino versus La Nina cycles over time, and the way it's trending right now, it's pretty much going to be a decent El Nino. It's called the Oceanic El Nino Index. It's really cool. I look at it all the time. They update it. It's basically, so the way that they define an El Nino is they look at the sea surface temperatures anomalies around the equator. That's not the right one.
That's not it?
Oceanic Nino Index. I think it might be the first. That's the one, yeah. So if you go all the way to the bottom, you can see right there, that's like in the red. Mm-hmm. So it is actually they're designated an El Nino. So basically these are sea surface temperature anomalies going back for, 50 plus years or something like that. The blue periods are La Nina years. The periods that are in black, those are what they call neutral years, essentially. The red periods are different El Ninos, and you can look at the numbers there. So it's based on the threshold anomaly over the norm. So it has to be 3 or 5 consecutive periods, which are 3 months averages, 0.5 above the norm. It's a little complicated. You get at the top of the link. There's like something.
Well, I'm seeing it. We have 5 in a row over
pod,
0.5.
We'll put the link in the bio, or if you're.
We'll put up the figure too.
Yeah, put up the figure as well, so you can see what we're looking at. It's
a great link. You can.
So basically, 3 consecutive months at a half of a degree over the norm.
Correct.
Calls for.
Yep.
So does that mean a half a degree below would be the La Nina?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. No, it's
So
a great link.
scientifically,
Yeah.
we are.
I didn't realize that we could
in
actually
El
have
Nino.
a stalemate year. I thought it was one or the other. I didn't realize.
No.
But it
There's
seems like there's less black writing. So why do we call that normal?
It's based off like just what they consider the equator, like average to be essentially.
Okay, I guess
yeah.
normal
And
average.
and aside
it's
from
average.
temperature anomalies, what does an El Nino really dictate?
So it has. This is based off the equator, right?
Okay.
But these measurements have far wide-spanning like impacts on the differences of what we see like locally here off California. I mean, this is based off buoys set around the equator, but it definitely has impacts for our local fishing. We'll see warmer water generally during an El Nino, colder water during a La Nina, maybe more upwelling though during a La Nina, which brings more nutrients. So it's pretty crazy, and it can have a lot of impacts. Like during an El Nino, we might see a longer fishing season, essentially, our more pelagics. Like I think the last El Nino, I remember I was still catching yellowfin in December.
Yeah.
And there were definitely yellowfin caught in January, basically every month of the year. There were still yellowfin around. And it's really interesting. So getting back to what you were saying, Cameron, about last year being a La Nina, but we had a lot of rain, right? So typically what we know, we don't have data going back that far. We have a lot of data, but it is only like 100 years, or with less than 100 years, right? So we have these ideas of what we think are true, but what we saw in recent years is what we believe was true is kind of falling apart. Like maybe generally these trends are correct, but it's more complicated than what we actually know or think. So last year, an El Nino is supposed to be warm and wet, right? That's when Southern California generally gets the most rain. It's generally warm. La Nina is supposed to be cold and dry. Last year was a La Nina winter. It was wet.
Yeah.
But it was cold.
It was cold. It was definitely
cold.
Yeah. No, we had historic snowfall that year, but...
people were snowboarding Mammoth through the summer.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it was
insane.
It's kind of been that way the last few years, but last year was absolutely mental. So,
yeah.
In just San Diego, think about how many winter days we didn't get to surf last year, or even fish the bays or anything like that. It was just brown shit water, and it was freezing cold and windy.
No, we had more rain last year than Seattle, I think.
Yeah.
Which is just insane. Like, I was just talking to my friend. I'm like, hopefully you guys get the rain this year. We're good. So it's recent years, we don't know. It's getting more complicated, or there's more going on that what we have data to be able to explain. It's kind of like predicting the weather every week. It's going to be windy this day. Well, it might not be. So last year was an anomaly kind of in terms of what you expect from a La Nina. Who knows what this year will be, if it's actually going to be an El Nino. If you look at this, there's different plots where it'll show like the likelihood of certain areas to be warmer and wetter, or some areas to be normal. So it might be warmer and wetter off of Central California, but we might get a normal year off San Diego. It's all about the jet stream, how the jet stream gets impacted, because that is a big part of what the El Nino, like our La Nina thing is the temperatures of the oceans really dictate the wind patterns, essentially. So, depending on the wind direction or the intensity or where that, airstream is, like it really impacts the weather on land and in the water too. But yeah, so last year, another anomaly about a La Nina year is how many Dorado did we see last year?
Yeah.
It was insane.
Yeah, mental.
Yeah, like ridiculous.
We're not very old, but we asked, fishermen who have been fishing here for 40, 50 years, and they couldn't remember a year that we had that much biomass of Dorado ever.
Yeah.
I looked at the data. There were more Dorado caught last year than in the history of sport fishing, recreational. If you look at every year, last year there was more caught than any other year. We're not supposed to get mahi or dolphin fish, Dorado, whatever you want to call them, like that, unless it's an El Nino year.
Yeah.
That said, the water was pretty warm last year, so that's another, divergence from the norm.
Yeah,
like
La Nina with warm water and warm water species.
That's so weird. That's so strange, because the quantity, the volume of Dorado that were up here, and the water was warm. We were seeing the Dorado early. Remember, we were out there in maybe May or something, and you were seeing these schools greyhounding through. We were like, what the hell is that?
Yeah.
And then there was just like an indication for the never-ending summer of fishing, and then for it to lead into that winter, that's so strange.
Something interesting too that kind of noticed the past 2 years is that warm water fish, it won't come up the line until our sea surface temperature is a certain degree, reaches a certain threshold. But it seems at the end of the season, before it disappears, it'll stay even after the water cools off more. Like, we're catching yellowfin now in 65 degree water that maybe was up here in 65 degree water, but we weren't really seeing until our sea surface temperatures were 69, 70 degrees.
Yeah.
I might be crazy, but
I don't know. No, it's true. These fish have a range of temperatures. They have their preferred temperature, but they can experience much cooler water temperatures, and it doesn't necessarily fade them if the food's around. A lot of it is like maybe if the food's still here, they're going to try and stay as long as they can. Like those bluefin we were talking about earlier off Northern California, the water was like, I forget what my buddy said, it was either 54 or 57
Wow.
degrees. And they're seeing foamers up there in 54 to 57 degree water, so they can tolerate a pretty good gap or range of temperatures. So
Does our biomass of bait generally disappear in the winter? Because when we were out 2 days ago, we couldn't go more than 100 yards without running over, but all the fish seems to, most of the fish seems to start getting out of here around this time every year.
yeah, I don't know if it necessarily disappears. It might move further offshore and outside of the range of skiffs or even sport boats. That's another good thing to talk about is like effort that's put in during the winter time, now versus historically, and just in general in the wintertime the water is colder, so fish like bait, you can see it in their growth slows down. They're just they're almost like hibernating too, like everyone's like, gets dark earlier, we stay inside longer during the winter, or whatever. But yeah, no, winter is an interesting one in terms of like what's out there right now and who's out there fishing for it. There's tag data that shows bluefin and albacore swimming through the Bight all year long, every month of the year, but there's no effort, so you're never gonna know they're there.
It's cold.
Yeah, and their behavior is probably different because they're cold, so they're like over it.
They're over it.
You talk about swordfish?
I was gonna say really quick with the effort thing. Kind of reminds me of like the sport boat nighttime fishing. Like like all of a sudden you get a couple dudes who are just real badass fishermen who are like, I'm not sleeping. I've been seeing fish 400 or 500 feet underneath the boat. Next thing you know, we have this crazy emergence of a nighttime fishery.
Right.
Is that something that, I guess it would be hard to predict if the biomass of fish wasn't even up here in previous years, but that stuff could have been down underneath us for a while and no one really put in the effort to fish for them.
Yeah, and they might have bit jigs at night, like back when this all started or whatever, like we started seeing more bluefin. If the fish aren't here, you're not going to hook one, so they have to be here. But yeah, there could have been a night bite like years ago, like, whatever. But yeah, no, effort is key. If you're not fishing for them, you're not going to catch them, So it's the same thing as like, the historical sport boats they had a season, but the season wasn't based on the fish. It was more based on their customers. Kids started going back to school. People had spent a bunch of their money already. They're not buying tickets on charter boats, So the charter boats aren't running. Those guys switched to different commercial fishing or something like that, So there was no one out there looking, no one out there even caring about going bluefin or yellowfin fishing or whatever. But yeah, no, the whole night bite thing it's really interesting because generally speaking, just like most fish at night, most fish come up. Just like the deep scattering layer for swordfish, like we were talking about earlier, it'll come up at night. Swordfish come up at night. You can see these very distinct diurnal patterns. You tag the fish all night long, they're sitting up here. Sunrise, they go down, and they stay down. Sometimes they come up and down, like the basking. The guys, you can still harpoon them. So sometimes they do. But generally speaking, there's these amazing figures, which we can find and you can display as well, which show like this very diurnal pattern, like which is a night-day essentially. Like night, they're up shallow, and they go down deep during the day, and they come up. But yeah, it's just so weird that these bluefin, me and one of my colleagues have just been kind of trying to explain it. Why are these bluefin down deep at night when that's not what most of the data shows their behavior doing? So I don't know if there's behaviors changed recently, or I really don't know, to be honest.
Why are they eating lead jigs this big, 18 inches long?
No, it's crazy.
It's crazy.
I've been trying to get stomachs off those fish, and a lot of them are empty. Some of them have like myctophids or lanternfish or other deep scattering layer, like weird, like stuff that you would never see up high in the water column.
What is it? What is a myctophid?
It's a lanternfish,
okay.
like headlight fish or whatever. It's they're really cool. You can Google it.
Yeah, I want to see one.
Yeah, myctophids.
It's on the McDonald's menu.
The myctophins.
No, they're one of the most abundant fish in the sea, actually.
Really?
Yeah.
Is that like an anglerfish?
No, they're a little different.
When you say lanternfish, I just assume someone with the light on and said, "Oh."
Yeah, no, they're super cool.
Oh, yeah,
and they actually have like little photophores essentially, so they actually kind of glow a little bit. Our light reflects off them really well.
Oh, that's hence the name lantern.
Lanternfish, like the California headlight fish is like one of the more common whatever famous ones.
I'm gonna make you dive into swordfish now.
Yeah. I'm sure,
Now that
you've seen what's been going on.
Now that we're in
these last few
swordfish
weeks.
season, I know it's not necessarily your expertise, but you mentioned you have colleagues who study it. One, definitely curious about stock data, about general numbers of swordfish, and two, stomach contents, just for fun. We fish mainly here, it seems like, with squid, and on the East Coast they're fishing, strip baits, a piece of Dorado belly.
Yeah, definitely. Swordfish are super cool. I was really hoping to be able to target one deep dropping myself this year. Earlier this year I went out and got myself my first flying gaff, and I just haven't had the time to go out there and do it, and it's kind of a bummer because fishing has been really good the past couple of weeks. What was that 500 pounder caught or something like that, which is incredible fish for Southern California. But so generally you can go to the NOAA website and look up like swordfish recommendations in terms of stocks and stuff like that. Our stock that we see here off Southern California in the Bight all the way up to Monterey Bay and stuff like that is considered healthy and a good option if you're going to buy fish at a seafood market or something like that. They consider it like a stock which is like very in good shape.
Is sustainable the right word?
Yeah, sustainable. Okay. Especially the way we fish them here. It's a sustainable method. It's not.
One at a time.
Yeah, like the deep set buoy gear or the harpoon fishery is the cleanest, most sustainable way to target a swordfish compared to like a long line or something like that, which is what most of the imported swordfish is caught by. No, our stocks are considered like a very good option or a good choice if you were a consumer going to a seafood market looking for swordfish. Something caught locally and sold locally is always your best choice, no matter what kind of fish. But if you're comparing swordfish, our stock is doing it's quite well. It's considered, I think it maybe even considered underfished, something like that. I don't know. Don't quote me on that one. But stomach content of swordfish is also really interesting too. They're like I don't know, bluefin, Opah, swordfish, they're all a little different. Like bluefin, generally what I'm seeing, they're feeding further up in the water column. Opah kind of do this everything. You'll see everything from surface. I've seen anchovy and Opah, then you have deep water, smelt, and other stuff in their same stomach. So Opah are doing all kinds of crazy stuff. But swordfish, generally during the day, they're feeding down deep. So recently, we've seen a lot of anchovy actually, which is interesting, hard to explain. A lot of hake in the same stomachs, a lot of market squid. Years back when we were more of those Humboldt squid, those big Humboldt squid, you'd find a lot of Humboldt squid in swordfish. So just like any fish, they're opportunistic. They're eating what's available. Essentially, whatever's most abundant, you'll probably find in their stomachs. There's a lot of anchovy around, so it's not that surprising that there's anchovy in their stomachs. Squid years, there's a lot of squid in their stomachs. What was I going to say? The stomach that my colleague did sometime last week. We could put up a picture of it actually. It's pretty cool. It was full of, I think it had like 19 hake, something like that, 2 market squid, and like a Pacific mackerel that was like that big. It was like, and that was not the bait. That was a naturally feeding event where it ate a big Pacific mackerel. Whoa. But they also had hake, which are down deep. So.
Is it a general consensus that when those fish are up basking in the daytime, they're not really feeding?
Yeah. So
maybe not.
Well, how they get an anchovy then if they're not eating?
They might have eaten up on they might feed occasionally at the surface. I'm sure they do. They eat pitch baits occasionally. You know, they're not always, but in general, they're kind of just chilling, warming up. So imagine a swordfish, you spend most of your time down deep foraging. The water down there is much colder than it is at the surface. And they eventually get to the point where they're like, oh, I'm cold. If I go up there, I can warm up and digest. So your digestive processes slow down as well when you're down deep in cold water. So to come up into the warm water, you get more ability to swim again. Actually, like, when you're cold, you're just like, oh. But their digestion is going to occur faster too. So a lot of times they're just sitting at the surface, basically digesting, kind of hanging out. Yeah. So that's, I don't know. The harpoon fishermen really want to better understand that, because there's years where you don't see that much basking. Does that just mean there's not that many swordfish around? or is their behavior different? Yeah.
Have you ever, or your colleague, ever seen a rock cod inside their stomach?
Yeah,
How
definitely,
big?
definitely. Decent, like something like that.
If you're
probably.
listening on Spotify or Apple, he's making about what, foot?
foot and a half.
We were talking about this the other day, Alex Danko and I was like, man, that's like one of us eating like a ping pong ball with toothpicks in it. Like, dude, how great was that? With this, they have really soft mouths. Like, how are they just eating a whole rock cod? Like,
yeah, I don't know.
They don't have a fork and knife.
I'm pretty sure they eat them whole. Yeah,
that's gnarly.
They just suck them down. Yeah, no, I've seen pretty decent size, rockfish and bluefin stomachs too, when they're focused on seamounts. A lot of times, like on the Cortez, a lot of the bluefin that I got in winter, like December, all little rockfish. Yeah.
Interesting. Do you think there's merit when deep dropping, for all the lights? Is more lights better? Is no lights better?
I don't know. It's a good question. I've thought about that myself. I think, the way that they get caught a lot of times in the commercial fishery, they put like a glow stick on there. So, and we did some work like one line with glow stick, one line without, and see if they get more bites either way or not. I don't have any data that say one is better or not, but anything to potentially draw in a fish and attract them. It's like even like spear fishermen diving off kelp patties or whatever, or even locally in the kelp forest, a lot of times they'll flash something to attract the yellowtail. So just something to get their attention, essentially. I don't know. You can definitely probably catch them without lights. Yeah.
Well, it would make sense, right? It's a lot of these fish down deep are putting off bioluminescence, or I don't know if I'm saying. I don't know if I'm saying the right term.
We were talking about that. No, before we stepped in here, you were talking about
you mentioned
the DSLs and the bioluminescence around them. So like, would that, if they're accustomed to seeing light down there, and if the bioluminescence is, around food, wouldn't their brains kind of see that light and think, oh, let me go suss it out and there might be something to eat? Like,
yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, definitely. It's light in the dark,
Is that the same thing with the glowing jigs for the bluefin? Is it the same thing?
Well, you put a sinker down, they still eat it.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, I don't know.
I'm still not convinced on the glow thing mattering for fish and bluefin. I never really thought it did.
Yeah.
But
I've fish and sea bass, you light up your glow jig, whatever, even like at night on a squid bed, but I don't know.
Yeah.
Just got to put the jig in front of a fish's face,
yeah,
essentially,
when it's hungry, it's hungry. I can't speak for swordfish. I never caught one. I'd love to, but I've seen a ton of tuna caught at night, and like you said, they eat 16-ounce lead sinkers that are 3 inches long. So.
Yep.
I don't think a swordfish is eating that.
No, I have the same person that I was talking about earlier. Just like, why are they down deep? Like, why are they eating these things? Like, what is it? Like, are you hitting them in the face? Essentially, like, are they actually like turning and chasing it down? It's really hard to actually be able to figure that out.
Yeah. Drop a GoPro down or something.
Yeah, no, I was just thinking you need a lot of cameras out there. Like, they have cameras everywhere on land now. Like, you just need a bunch of cameras.
Yeah. Well, so one thing I made a note of too before we kind of wind down here. I know we're probably almost been in here for about an hour, so
let's keep going. I got questions.
I can talk all day.
I got questions.
I was kind of curious about just like the trends of historical SST data and how it's changed. I guess we kind of talked, it's really based on the El Nino, La Nina year. But the overall warming of the oceans, like you said, you can't really make predictions. You want to tell us the facts. I'm like really, really curious about where we are headed in an overall sea surface temperature. Like to me, it's crazy because like last winter was so cold. The water was so cold. And I feel like I hadn't seen anything like that in forever. And it's really contrary to what I'm seeing in the media and also in the summers. Like we have really, really warm summers, really, really cold winter, and then it goes stale for a couple of years. Like, I don't understand it.
Yeah, no, it's like I was saying, related to the way that the weather's changing, or the El Nino versus La Nina, and what we see in terms of impacts. Like, we're China just going through a period of like all kinds of like unknowns, to be honest. Like, we We had that really warm, they call it like this warm blob patch that was off of Northern California and stuff like that, which persisted for a long time. And we don't really know what necessarily started that or drove it. Water was very cold this last winter, but a lot of this stuff basically is we're seeing more extremes, essentially. So you're gonna get a really cold year, a really warm year, but the general trend has been going warmer over time. But you still might be trending warm, but you're still gonna get really cold years, occasionally, or maybe more often, or basically it seems like the extremes are becoming more common. But in general, the trend is warming. Yeah.
The extreme stuff's crazy. Also, what happened to the kelp? Where did it go? And when's it coming back?
I don't know. I dove at Point Loma last week, and it was pretty thick, but not as thick as it used to be.
Not much in La Jolla.
No, I know. I miss it in La Jolla. I've spent a lot of time fishing La Jolla off my kayak and my little aluminum beach launching off right there.
Oh, the shores
skiff.
there, yeah.
And there's no kelp in La Jolla. We don't really know. It's a good question. Can't
sea urchins.
say either
We
way.
don't have the urchins down here like they do in NorCal, I mean, like we do, but not like as thick as they are up there. Like there's up there they can basically say, okay, the urchins are wiping out the kelp. Here it's like, I mean, before that, whatever that 2014, 2015, like you would have or like real calm glassed over sunset surfs because the kelp bed was so thick. The wind wasn't really getting through, even if it was a nice onshore breeze, and it's just gone. It just hasn't been like that since since before I was in college, it feels like, which was, 10, 12 years ago. So,
For sure. So kelp really can grow fast, It really likes cold water years. So it hates warm water. And we had those 2014, 2015 were some of the warmest years in terms of sea surface temperature on record. So it might not just, it's taking longer to rebound than normal. I was thinking last year with the La Nina conditions in that cold water, we'd see it start coming back, but it didn't happen. I don't think it's necessarily the sea urchins, because you're right, we don't have as many sea urchins down here. Don't know. I've asked a couple different researchers about it. And, we don't know. It's a bummer though.
Yeah. Yeah, local fishery, surfing, everything around here revolves around the kelp, So
yeah, for
we'll
sure.
see. I mean, hopefully we can bear through a few months of extreme cold, so the kelp replenishes.
Well, hopefully it's not. It was last winter, and it didn't come back. So
well, I'll do the cold but no wet. I'm done with the rain, man. I'm okay with cold for a little bit. That's what thick wetsuits are for.
have you been able to utilize any of the data and your research? Actually, I know you fish quite a bit when you have time.
Yeah.
But utilize any of it on the water and have maybe a more successful day than you would have otherwise, or are you just fishing like the rest of us?
I'm pretty much just fishing like the rest of you, reading the signs, looking for birds, reading the water. I, follow the chlorophyll charts and temperature charts and stuff like that. But just trying different jigs sometimes, finding the bait. I'm just like a fish like everyone else, essentially.
Is there a fishery that you would say is your favorite, or like a species to target?
Probably like local yellowtail.
Yeah.
Just, it's always been my favorite. I really want to catch a swordfish. I really wanted to catch an Opah. Opah was my favorite for a long time, but going back to my roots, it's nice yellow over 40 pounds on the beach.
It's rewarding.
Like yeah, there's nothing better.
I spent a lot of time in 3 layers last winter trying to catch yellows on,
Yeah.
locally.
We lost a few on the buoys.
Oh man, it started biting right when commercial lobster season opened, and all the fish were
2 days in a row, and it was, oh god.
Yeah, it was not fun.
Heartbreaking.
Oh no, that's brutal when you wrap on a buoy like that. Yeah.
When you run like 20 feet outside, all the bait's gone. There's no fish. Okay, that's where they are. So I guess we'll go hook another one and lose it in the trap.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, well, we had that one hooked, and the reel came out of its seat.
Oh yeah, just unprepared.
Yeah.
Tackle failure. Tackle failure.
Well, the fun part is we were able to get it back on, and then we lost it in the buoy. It was so funny.
We actually had some squid bed fishing like mid-season here locally.
All the way up the coast too. There were a couple of different ones that popped up. I'm sure people don't mind us talking about it now because it's not there anymore. But at the time, it was hush hush here, hush hush there. But it was a few kind of south of Encinitas, north of Torrey Pines area, and then a few further south. And I feel like there was a couple days where they were really good.
Yeah, I won't reference any specific one, but Brian Tim and I were out. He caught like a 38 pounder. It was a really nice squid bed, and they're so fat.
Yeah, and there's nothing better than a nice
so
squid bed
fat.
yellow. I fished it a couple of times too. There was squid all over the place, like lots of squid.
And I like eating squid too. So
yeah, no, the commercial guys came in. There was commercial grade squid up and down the coast in Southern California this summer, and yeah, I got a 38 pounder myself.
Nice.
I didn't get to fish it that much. The other time that I did fish it is I did see the guys that won the BD yellowtail tournament.
Oh, really?
They were anchored 2 boats down for me, and there was like another 50 pounder caught in between me and them, and I didn't get a bite. I was just like,
wait, did you fish a tournament, or you just happened to be?
no,
out
I was
that
just
day?
fishing.
You gotta fish the
that's
tournament.
fun.
I know.
Wow.
Every year I've wanted to, but I was just
Yeah, they caught. I think both their fish were over 40.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
Two
saw
fish.
Impressive
them
fish.
land them.
Yeah.
I was there. I was just my buddy was next to me, and he landed a legit 50 pound
Jeez.
Wow.
yellow on right next to me. I was just like, am I too deep? Like, am I on the
You're like,
edge?
you're like good for you, dude.
How bummed would you be to land a 50-pound yellow?
I would not be bummed.
I mean, on the day of the tournament, knowing it would have been the fish that got you, what did those guys?
Yeah,
win,
no,
like
he
11K or
wasn't in the
something for
tournament.
everything?
He wasn't in. My buddy that landed one wasn't in the tournament.
Yeah.
He was bigger than
That's
the
a
ones that won the
solid fish.
tournament.
Yeah, that'd be.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Do you-
but you're
I was
right,
more
man.
bummed than him though. So.
Fair enough.
Do you fish much in Baja?
Yeah, whenever I get down there, that's one of the main reasons why I go fishing in Baja. I love fishing the coast, like Pacific side for calicos and stuff like that. I spent a lot of time in LA Bay, fishing there for basically everything.
Yeah, that is one of my favorite spots on earth. The
Yeah.
Cabrera fishing.
Been going down there since I was 7 years old.
Wow.
Yeah,
You had it when it was no one there.
it's still it's changed a lot, but it was better about I'm not that old.
Is it pretty much the same fishery as it was, not that long ago?
Every year changes a little bit. Some years the inside the bay is better than other years.
Mhm.
Some years you have to go further, but there's still really good fishing opportunities within 15, 20 miles.
For sure.
Any given day, for sure. I've seen it bite right there off the lighthouse, like for a couple of months at a time, all
Wow.
25, 30 pound
Yeah.
grade yellows. And then there's years where you have to go out to the big island, Isla de la Guarda,
Mm-hmm.
and that's the only spot where the big ones are. It's all little rats in the bay, but it doesn't matter.
You're
It's
catching
all,
yellowtail. You're
Yeah,
stoked.
it's also
Yeah.
fun. It's also beautiful down there.
It is, and the people are awesome. And my friends and I started making an annual trip out of it, and it's really cool to see. A lot of the captains are really getting on board. Let's start releasing more fish.
Nice. Yeah,
Um,
for sure.
Like we had our best day. There were 3 of us fishing. We caught maybe like 60 to 70 cabrilla. Super epic day. Like really nice grade too, and we kept 2 for dinner. And I want to be able to go back there next year and do the same thing, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah,
take
no.
care of the fishery, and it'll take care of you.
Yeah.
It's fun. It's too much fun.
No, I try and go
Gotta
every
keep it
October. I didn't make it this year.
October, is that when it's 120 degrees?
No, that's when
No?
it's when it's almost perfect. That's great weather is October. It's 80, 85. Nights are nice and colder. Yeah, August, too much. I used to do that a while when I was younger. But
It's like, you want to go catch a Dorado in LA Bay? And last year we were like, we have about 1 billion off the coast here, so we just take the skiff out.
yeah, for sure. It's good last year.
It's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Anything else you have a dying need to know? A dying need
I
to
don't
know
at
about?
the moment, I
It's your
think
last chance.
Yeah, we kind of ticked everything off. And we can always come back and run an episode 2 later. Especially, we should probably do like a preseason, bring back like a second part and
Yeah, I'm
see what's
down.
kind of happened, especially after the winter, because I really hope that El Nino comes for some warm water and some,
Me too.
Yeah.
cold water, warm winds. Right? What was it? I already messed it up.
Warm and wet.
Warm and wet. So,
Warm and wet.
wet.
I don't know. You kind of need them both playing with each other, because you
Yeah.
need those cold years to bring up all the nutrients, and then get warm, and then there's tons of food here, so all the plagues come. And
Yeah.
That sounds perfect. Let's do that.
that's why I love living here. It's so dynamic,
Yeah.
and you get such different stuff all the time. Like, keeps you guessing.
Right on.
That's why I
Well,
love fishing.
appreciate having you here. Thanks
man.
for spending the time.
Nice talking to you guys.
Learned about 100 new things today. So
I should have brought a notebook.
we'll watch it back.
Yeah.
No,
For sure.
really appreciate it. I'm sure the audience is gonna love hearing all this stuff too.
No, I love working with fishermen. You know, there's nothing better than giving back to the community too. That's why, I mean, if you guys want, I'll be at whatever Bart Hall again. I'm always down at Bart Hall. Our day at the docks, we got a booth there, so I'd love to meet everybody in person. Just stop on by.
Yeah,
Say
go
hello.
visit Owyn and pick his brain,
Yeah.
bug him.
Yeah, I'll talk your ear off.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, yeah. Thanks, guys. We'll
Let's go catch a swordfish.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I got the gaff.